This is an RPG a Day response from the Casting Shadows blog. It's August 11th. It's now time for the 11th question in our series. We've covered a lot of ground already, but there's a lot more ground still left ahead of us. Now, today's question, I'm sure, will get friends talking to one another and sharing examples and stories, and I wish that mine could as well, although, one of the people that I'm going to cite today as having the most significant effect on my gaming is no longer with us, so that kind of sharing or conversation can no longer happen. But what person has had the profoundest effect on your gaming? To take a step back first before answering the question, I think it's important to recognize that as we explore gaming down through the years, I think everybody that we play with has some sort of effect on us as gamers, whether it be to confirm decisions that we've made about play, or to open our eyes or expand our thinking about certain subjects. You can have a one-off encounter with a player you will never meet again and be so wowed by how they play that you try to attain it yourself. That person has had an effect on your gaming. Or conversely, you can game with a boor and vow to never become that person. And both of these are good things. But with that in mind, I suppose that the people that we absolutely need to consider for this question are the people that we played with first, the models on which we built our initial takes on gaming. Even if we've come very, very far from how we used to play then, that was our starting point. So I like to think about how I came into role-playing. And when I read accounts of the early days of gaming, when I read about the latter 70s, the early 80s, when I hear people talking about it in videos, when I see comments and whatnot, I see that there was a significant amount of people who approached it from the point of view of an avatar. That certainly seems to be a very common conceit used in setting up the game, that adventurers from our world or people from our world were taken into a world of fantasy and magic. This was a staple of popular fiction at the time, and later. Even in the late 80s, we have the Fionavar Tapestry, which uses that conceit, and earlier conceits. Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's Court. This idea has been around for a while. How can we navigate and how can we deal with the person who's interacting with the story, the player or the reader? How can we deal with their perspective if we're going to be exploring a story in a world that does not perhaps follow their perspective or is built on rules that they are not completely familiar with? Well, we can transport them there and not have to deal with that issue. We can make that part of the fun. So those early days of gaming involved a lot of creating character stats, but maybe not as much creating of character as might have become more popular later. Meaning people were playing themselves. They're making the decisions using their full range of knowledge and with their personalities and having a blast doing it. But when I started playing, how I was introduced is that the character is not you. That part of the fun is taking a look at the stats, taking a look at the occupation and whatnot, the setting, the world that you're in, and figuring out another way to be. So from my very first session, this is how I've approached character creation. And very few times over the decades that I've been playing have I moved into a style of play where this is me acting in this fictional world. So to the people who introduced me to gaming, this was their interpretation of it, which they passed on to me and which I retain. I consider this to be the default setting, the normal. And it has defined an awful lot about how I approach new games, how I understand games, how I learn them. I tend to go to the character creation section first. I approach games through the vehicle of character, and looking back on that very first night of play, it's character that we talked about the most. how does character shape everything about what we were going to do. So it wasn't about the weapons, and it wasn't about the rules so much as it was about who are you going to be? Who are you going to be in this fantasy world? So thank you for that and that effect it has had on my gaming. Now later, once I had found my own voice, once I had found games that meshed really well with my strengths and weaknesses in the Game Master's chair, games like Call of Cthulhu, I was starting to feel really good, really able to experiment and learn new things all the time. And I was looking for players that wanted to be able to do that too. And I found a really cool group of them. And one guy in that group, sadly no longer with us, I'm pretty sure he was a genius. I feel like he was a genius, and I've said that before. And he had a way of asking you questions about whatever it was that you were doing. It could be painting the house, it could be making some tea, or it could be preparing for a campaign, or just making a character. But he asked the right questions in the right way, and it's the path that he would set up as you're moving toward a campaign. That had a profound effect on me. Thinking about the game beyond who you were going to invite to it, and beyond who you hoped would enjoy it, that kind of thing. He approached it from a whole other level, beyond that, where very specific personalities and the types of characters they were likely to make, and the next evolution of how they would play characters, and the right questions and the right pushes and pulls in place so that they could experience something completely new. And the synergy between all of this going around, between all of the characters, that's how he was looking at campaigns. While a lot of us were still fumbling around saying, whoa, look at this game, I can't wait to get it on the table, and trying to run it the very night that you bought it, kind of thing. He had a profound effect on how I game. And while there were many things that I experimented with in gaming that he thought, maybe foolish, or maybe a waste of time, or were destined to fail, or whatever. I mean, he wasn't all sunshine and roses, positivity, and a mentor from beyond the stars kind of thing. He was always supportive, and that isn't something that was terribly common. We all have our opinions, and what I liked about him was that he would tell you what his opinion was and then help you do what you were trying to do. I liked how he would show you the roadblocks and then help you navigate them. And sometimes we failed. Sometimes we were wildly successful. Sometimes we were both surprised. Sometimes only I was surprised. I like to think sometimes only he was surprised, but I will never know. So, these two things, one at the beginning of my gaming and one somewhere in the middle, these two experiences had the most profound effect on my gaming. My starting point, and then this course correction into looking at games as a filter by which I could look at other games. Looking at other gamers as a filter by which I could look at myself and other gamers, and seeing how what we were doing at the table was, how it could be, if interfering with it was possible, and if so, what the spin-off effects would be. Putting me on that path is why this channel is here and why these discussions take place. Okay, tomorrow's day 12. Another new question, another new day, another opportunity for sharing. Take a look at brigadecon.org when you get the time. There's a gallery there in the RPGaDay 2016 pull-down menu, and there may be wonders awaiting for your viewing and listening and reading pleasure. See you tomorrow. One of the things that makes Autocratic's RPGaDay event so much fun, beyond the positivity of sharing what we love about gaming, is the simple act of sharing. If you see a post by someone else out there somewhere that you think is cool, share it. Make sure old-timers and newcomers get to see it.